Revolutionary War than American personnel. And to this day, they are in the field with us everywhere where we need to be, our greatest ally. And it's important that people understand the importance of that friendship. And Lafayette was the legacy, was the genesis of that relationship. And number three, of course, is General Lafayette. Not only as an important general of the Revolutionary War, but also as a very important person when he came in 1824, because he was an abolitionist, he was a feminist, he was a man that truly believed all people were created equal. He was a friend to the Native Americans, he believed in the freedom of press, and these are things that we're talking about as we go around the country. Before we start our ceremony, I want to introduce a few dignitaries. Now, there are going to be some dignitaries who will be speaking today, but some are here that will not be speaking today. Grand Marshal Mark Schaefer is with us today from Indiana State Masonic. Thank you so much, sir. It's so appropriate that Grand Marshal Schaefer is here, because when Lafayette came 200 years ago, all the Masons came out in droves. It was a very important thing for them. Lafayette was very important to them, and being a Mason was very important to Lafayette. The builder of the Mechanic is here today, a very important person. This person just spent a lot of time replicating the boat that Lafayette was on, and we're going to see that on the river soon, and that's James Lynch. Where's James? Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Thank you very much. And you'll notice Mr. Lynch carved a little dog this morning for the front of the boat, because our dog is too large. Where's our dog here? This is Quiz. Quiz was on the boat. I'm not going to tell you what happened to Quiz because there's children in the crowd. I also want to mention that Stephen Salmon is here, Perry County historian. Where's Stephen? Thank you. So Stephen made up a committee of 4 people that have been working on this for the last few months, and I'll introduce the other people. But Stephen, thank you very much. You've been wonderful. You did a lot for us, the buses. Thank you so much. And finally, I want to introduce a committee chair from the American Friends of Lafayette, traveled from St. Louis today. And she ran everything for us in St. Louis last week. We had 3 great days in St. Louis, and that's Diane Cohn. Thank you very much for being here. Now I'm going to ask for Katie Wilburn to come up. We're going to sing, well, first we're going to have the French National Anthem. And where's Mrs.
This is the long-suffering sister Martha.
Long-suffering sister, that's right. So we're going to hear the French National Anthem. We play that at all our events. And then Katie will sing the American National Anthem.
Get this right.
Thank you very much, long-suffering sister. And now, Katie Wilburn with the National Anthem of the United States of America.
Yes, you're free to sing with me. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through for the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Now the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Viva Lafayette and Viva USA!
Great job, Katie. Thank you very much. You guys are holding the flag. I'm going to introduce our next speaker. So about 2 months ago, I was in Louisville giving a talk, and a gentleman came up to me and handed me an envelope. And inside that envelope was pictures of this site and a history of what happened here 200 years ago. And that person is standing right next to me here, and his name is Jerry Hubbs. And I promise you, ladies and gentlemen, if it wasn't for Jerry, we would not be here today. This has been something on our calendar for many, many years. This was a very important day for us, but we just couldn't get it off the ground. And thank God for Jerry, because Jerry did get it off the ground. So now it is my distinct pleasure and honor to turn the microphone over to Jerry Hubbs. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Jack. Well, my story is, I was born in Tell City 83 years ago, but I've lived in Louisville most of my life. So when I visited my cousins, we went up this road all the time to swim in the lake at Urban Ridge. So I've seen this sign for most of my life, but I had no idea what the story was behind Lafayette and in southern Indiana. So I did a little research, and I did an article which was printed last year in the Perry County News, and they're going to reprint it again, I think, in the next issue with a few corrections. What I found out was a lot about Lafayette. I knew he was a general, but I had no idea how he got here. He was 19 years old, and in France, he liked what was going on with the American Revolution against the British. So at 19 years old, he applied to come over. Well, his family said no, France said no, but he said, I'm going anyway. So he paid his own way over, and he through the Masons, he linked up with Benjamin Franklin, who connected him to George Washington. George Washington fell in love with the guy right away. He thought, this is a son that I never had. So he gave him a colonel's commission, and he was in many battles. He was in all up and down the coast. He wintered over at Valley Forge. He was injured at a place called Brandywine in Pennsylvania, and anyway, ended up in the most influential of all the battles at Yorktown in Virginia. He brought his troops in. He was a major general at that point. George Washington brought his army in. Rochambeau, the other Frenchman, came in with his army, and they cornered Cornwallis at Yorktown. He finally had to give up, surrender, and that was the end of the American Revolutionary War. So Lafayette had a big part in the Revolutionary War. 40 years later, the President of the United States, James Monroe, said, let's invite him back over and kind of pump up people about the Revolution. And he's probably the only general still alive that was active back then. So he came over, they brought him over at our expense this second time, and he went to New York for celebrations and dinners and awards, then Philadelphia, then Virginia, Charleston, overland to Mobile, Alabama, where he caught the steamboat Natchez. Steamboats were only on the river about 10 or 12 years before that, so they were susceptible to sandbars, navigation, rocks, and you name it. So anyway, the Natchez took him to St. Louis and then to Tennessee, to Nashville, where they chartered little steamboat called the Mechanic. It was small by standards of the Natchez, which is a pretty big boat. So anyway, they come up the Ohio River, going to Louisville, actually going to the southern side of Louisville, which is in Falls of the Ohio, and he was going to be transported up there. Somewhere out here, they hit a snag, and these steamboats now, they were all wood. There was no steel hulls in those days. So the snag punctured a hole in the bottom of the hull and started to sink somewhere out there in front of us. And so the captain said, abandon ship. So they ended up rowing, I think, to Rock Island, which is now gone, and ultimately came over here. Well, the word got out, this was at midnight, and I've got an artist's view of it on the buses when you all leave. You can take one with you. But it shows rowing ashore from the Mechanic going down. As he came ashore, who was this guy? He said he was an important general, Lafayette. People said, oh my goodness, Lafayette. My dad was in the Revolutionary War. I know who he was. So people came from the hills and the hollers around here from Kentucky and Indiana to see and greet General Lafayette. So that was how he got here. That's how his name got on the cliff behind us. The story I heard when I was a teenager was that he took a bath up there in one of those pools that you see up there. I don't know if that's true or not, but makes a good story. There's a sign out here that talks about Lafayette's tour, how it ended up here, and nobody lost their life when the boat sank. Lafayette came ashore with his son, George Washington Lafayette, and LeSueur, his secretary, and I think a governor and some generals, different people on the boat. But nobody lost their life, so that was a good thing. And when steamboats crashed or did anything, usually the boilers blew up and killed everybody on board. So he was very fortunate that nothing happened to anybody. And that was a tragedy. I had one last night where I fell, ended up in the emergency room for 6 hours. You got stitched up. That's why I'm wearing glasses, so you can't see those stitches. So with that, I think I'll turn it back to Chuck. But now you know the rest of the story, why Lafayette's name is on this clip.
Jerry, nobody could have done that better than you. Thank you so much. Let's hear it again for Jerry Hubbs. Thank you. Now, I'm going to call up General Lafayette now. Well, please know he's not used to this amplification system. It's not something he ever saw when he was here before. So please bear with him. But General Lafayette, will you come address the...
Perhaps I shall try to speak from this point.
Probably you feel more comfortable doing that, General.
I think so. I am not convinced of the efficacy of those contraptions. Mesdames et messieurs, as you have heard, this is a spot where I suffered, shall we say, an unpleasant setback in my pleasant journey to visit the western part of this country. I've had a few days to come to terms with what happened, and I've prepared a small narrative that will tell you in my own words what happened that fateful night and how we were saved the next day, and I was able to continue my voyage in a manner that I am overwhelmed with emotion and gratitude at the welcome and the good feelings I have felt from you Americans since my arrival in this part of your country. The place at which the disaster occurred was about 125 miles by water below Louisville, near the mouth of Deer Creek on the Kentucky side of the Ohio River, and about 50 yards from shore. During the whole of yesterday, the 8th, we worked hard on board the Mechanic. I replied to a great number of letters which were addressed to me every day from all parts of the Union and dictated to Monsieur Levasseur some directions to my superintendent at Lagrange, indicating what changes and improvements I wished made before my return to France. Being somewhat fatigued by this labor, I retired early to bed in the ladies' cabin below, and was already asleep at 10 o'clock. And my son Georges, coming below from the deck where he had been walking, expressed his astonishment to Monsieur Levasseur that in so dark a night our captain did not come to, or at least abate the speed of the vessel. I was later told they fully agreed in the justice of this remark, but being accustomed for some months to permit no difficulty to arrest me and to travel at all times, they soon began to speak of other things. And Georges also laid down and slept with every feeling of safety. Monsieur Levasseur remained conversing with Monsieur de Sion. This is a young man we met in Charleston, South Carolina, and who has been accompanying us ever since, and he is with us here today still. With the exception of the pilot and two men, everybody was asleep around us, and at 11 o'clock the profound silence that reigned on board was only broken by the deep grating of the engine and the dashing of the water against the sides of the vessel. 12 o'clock struck, and sleep was beginning to invite us to repose, when the mechanic suddenly received a horrible shock and stopped short. At this extraordinary concussion, I awoke with a start. Georges sprung from his bed, half dressed, and Monsieur Levasseur ran on deck to learn what was the matter. He there found two of our fellow passengers whom anxiety had brought up to the surface, but who were returning, saying we had probably struck on a sandbank and that there was no danger. Not trusting this opinion, he went on into the great cabin. All of the passengers were in a state of great agitation, but still in doubt as to the nature of the accident. Some had not even quitted their beds. Decided on not going below without positively ascertaining the real state of things, Monsieur Levasseur seized a light and ran forward. The captain arrived there about the same time. They opened the hatches and ran forward. The hold was already half filled with water, which rushed in torrents through a large opening. A snag! A snag! Cried the captain. Hasten Lafayette to my boat! Bring Lafayette to my boat! This cry of distress had reached the great cabin, and every mouth repeated it with dismay. But it had not been heard in our cabin, where I, by the advice of my son, permitted myself to be partly dressed by my faithful valet Bastien. What news? Said I, seeing Monsieur Levasseur enter. He cried that we shall go to the bottom, General, if we cannot extricate ourselves, and we have not a moment to spare. And he immediately began to collect my papers, which he threw pell-mell into his portfolio. Georges, on his part, hastily collected those objects he thought necessary to me, and begged me to follow him. But my toilette not being yet made, I wished him to go first and provide means of escape. What, cried my son, do you think that in such circumstances we will leave you for a moment? And immediately they seized a hand and dragged me towards the door. I followed them, smiling at their haste, and began to ascend with them, but had scarcely reached the middle of the stairs when I perceived that I had forgotten my snuff box, ornamented with a portrait of Washington, and wished to return for it. Monsieur Levasseur went to the end of the cabin, found it, and brought it to me. At this time, the rolling of the vessel was so violent and irregular, and the tumult over our heads augmented to such a degree that I believed we should not have time to escape before she sunk. At last, we reached the deck, where all the passengers were in greatest confusion, some bringing their trunks, others looking for the boat, and crying out for me. I was already in the midst of them, but owing to the darkness of the night, no one recognized me. The boat heeled so much to starboard that it was with difficulty we could keep our footing on the deck. The captain, assisted by 2 sailors, had brought his boat to the side, and I heard the sonorous voice crying out, "Lafayette! Lafayette!" But we could not reach him on account of the confusion around us. Nevertheless, the vessel heeled more and more. Each moment augmented the danger. We felt that it was time to make a last effort and pushed into the middle of the crowd where Monsieur Levasseur cried, "Here is General Lafayette!" This exclamation produced the effect he anticipated. The most profound silence succeeded the confusion. A free passage was opened for us, and all those who were ready to spring into the boat spontaneously checked themselves, not wishing to think of their own safety before that of myself was ascertained. The difficulty was now to determine me to depart before all my fellow passengers and almost alone, for the boat would only hold a few persons. But I was soon obliged to yield to the will of all, energetically expressed by each, the irregular concussions of the vessel and the rocking of the boat, which was more than 4 feet lower than our deck, rendered a passage from one to the other extremely difficult, especially in the dark. The most active young man would not have hazarded a leap. Far from the darkness, he would have risked plunging into the water, and so great precautions were therefore to be adopted as regarded myself. Monsieur Levasseur went first into the boat, and whilst the captain kept her near as possible to the vessel, 2 persons descended with me, holding me under their shoulders. Monsieur Levasseur received me in his arms, but my weight added to his own on the side of the boat nearly capsized it, and losing my equilibrium, I should probably have fallen into the water with him if Monsieur Thibaudot, formerly president of the State Senate of Louisiana, had not given me his support and thus saved us both. As soon as they were assured that I was safely on board, they pushed off as rapidly as possible to prevent the other passengers from overloading our slight bateau. Although the greatest difficulties were overcome, all danger was not past. The land was to be made, but at what distance was it from us? Towards what shore should we direct our course? This the darkness of the night prevented us from ascertaining with certainty. Our captain soon made up his mind with decision. Holding the rudder with a firm grasp, he directed us to the left bank and ordered his 2 sailors to row gently. In less than 3 minutes, we happily reached a bank covered with a thick wood. In landing, our first care was to count and recognize each other. We were 9, the captain, 2 sailors, Monsieur Levasseur, Monsieur Thibaudot, Dr. Shelby carrying in his arms a child of about 7 or 8 years of age, the daughter of Reverend Mr. Campbell of Nashville, of a Presbyterian clergyman, the father of the child in question, and myself. It was then only that I perceived that my son was not with me, and immediately my habitual coolness in the presence of danger abandoned me. I was filled with anxiety and in a state of the most violent agitation. I began to call, "George! George!" with all my strength, but my voice was drowned by the cries which arose from the vessel and by the terrible noise made by the steam escaping from the engine, and I received no answer. In vain to reassure me, Monsieur Levasseur represented to me that my son was a good swimmer, and that he doubtless had remained on board voluntarily, and with his coolness he would escape all danger. Nothing had any effect. I continued to traverse the shore, calling on Georges. Monsieur Levasseur then threw himself into the boat with the captain to go to the aid of those who so much needed it. The vessel still floated, but almost on her beam ends. The captain mounted on board, and they received in his place a dozen persons who precipitated themselves into the boat and whom they carried to land without having been able to speak to my son, Monsieur de Sion, or my valet Bastien. They dared not give an account of this first attempt to me, and therefore made preparations for another trip, when a horrible crash and cries of despair announced that the vessel was sinking. At the same moment, I heard the water agitated in several directions by the efforts of those who were saving themselves by swimming. Monsieur Thibaudot, who had advanced into the water in order to judge better of what was passing, and to afford assistance to those who needed it, perceived a man exhausted with fatigue, drowning a few paces from the shore, in a spot where the water was only 3 feet in depth. He drew him out with such ease that a child might have rendered him the same service and laid him on the grass. But the unfortunate man was so agitated by fear that he continued to make on land all the movements of swimming, and would perhaps have killed himself by these useless efforts if Monsieur Thibaudot had not succeeded in calming him. At every instant, other persons arrived on shore, and among them I always expected to see and recognize my son Georges, and I demanded news of my son from all but in vain. I now myself began to fear for him. Another arrival of the boat informed us that the vessel had not entirely sunk, and that the starboard side was under water, but that the larboard and gangway were still above it, and that a great number of passengers had taken refuge there. Thinking there was an urgent necessity for helping those who remained in this critical situation, Monsieur Levasseur again entered the boat, and aided by a sailor approached the vessel. He first arrived at the prow. He called Georges with all his strength, but there was no answer. And then dropped along her side to the stern, and passing, he heard a voice, and examined. He heard a voice overhead cry out, "Is that you, Monsieur Levasseur?" He listened and examined attentively. It was our poor Bastien, who was holding with difficulty to the roof of the upper cabin, the pitch of which was very great from the oversetting of the vessel. As soon as he came near him, he slid down and fortunately fell into the boat. When they arrived at the stern, he again called Georges, and he instantly answered him. His voice appeared to be perfectly calm. "Are you in safety?" said Monsieur Levasseur. "I could not be better," replied he gaily. This reply gave me much relief, for my fears were really becoming serious. At the same instant, Monsieur Walsh of Missouri, who was near him, gave me everything that could be saved of our baggage. This was a small portmanteau of Georges, one of my bags, the portfolio of Monsieur Levasseur, which he had thrown on the deck when he was aiding me to descend, and about 60 out of the 200 letters we had prepared for the post on the preceding days. All the others were lost. Monsieur Levasseur now returned to land with Bastien and 2 other persons, and hastened to assure me of the safety of my son. Satisfied that the vessel, having found support, could not sink any deeper, and consequently that there was no further danger to those on board, Monsieur Levasseur occupied himself with me, for whom they established a good bivouac around a large fire of dry branches. In the midst of this occupation, Georges and Monsieur de Sion, with the remainder of the passengers, arrived. We then learned at that moment of the wreck. Georges, seeing that Monsieur Levasseur was in the boat to watch over me, had returned to the cabin into which the water had already penetrated, and had made Bastien and Monsieur de Sion, who were imprudently endeavoring to save our effects, leave it. Then, only yielding ground as the water forced him, he had indefatigably occupied himself with the care of those around him. At one moment the water reached to the middle of his body, but his coolness and presence of mind reassured some persons who without him would perhaps have been dismayed and exposed to the greatest danger. Finally, we were told he would not leave the vessel until he was satisfied that all who remained on board belonged to her and could dispense with his assistance. Monsieur Georges Lafayette must have been shipwrecked often, said the captain, for he has behaved tonight as if he was accustomed to such adventures. From other accounts, it appears that almost immediately after my departure, the water entered our cabin, and with a violence which would not have permitted us to leave it if we had remained there only a few minutes longer. When we were well assured that no person had perished, we lighted candles and brought them from the wreck, from which several fires were kindled of brushwood as well, for the purpose of drying ourselves and to discover our situation. No house was near on the same side, and on the other side of the river, the nearest cabin was about 2 miles away. I slept for some moments on a mattress which had been found floating and was nearly dry on one side. The rest waited impatiently for day and occupied themselves in cutting wood to keep up the fires. A tolerably heavy rain added to our troubles, but unfortunately it was not of long continuance. As you see, it is very wet still today. At daybreak, the crew recommenced their trips to the vessel to endeavor to save some of the baggage and to procure food. The captain, Governor Carroll of Tennessee, and a young Virginian, Monsieur Caulfield, directed these researches with great activity. It was a singular and touching event to see a governor of a state, that is to say a first magistrate of a republic, without shoes, stockings, or hat, doing the duty of a boatman as if it had been his real occupation, and that much more for the benefit of others than for himself, for he had very little on board to lose by the shipwreck. Those different searchers obtained us a trunk belonging to me, in which were my most valuable papers, and a small part of the passenger's baggage. They also brought a leg of smoked venison, some biscuits, a case of claret, and a keg of Madeira. With these provisions, about 50 men, for such was our number, repaired their strength, exhausted by a night of labor and anxiety. The day, on its return, shone on an interesting picture. The shore was covered with wrecks of all kinds, in the midst of which each eagerly searched for their own property. Some mournfully recounted the extent of their losses. Others could not avoid laughing at the nakedness of costume in which they found themselves. This gaiety soon became prevalent, and pleasantries circulated around the fires of our bivouac, and at least smoothed the visages of the most sorrowful, and almost transformed our shipwreck into a party of pleasure. My carriage, a present from Mrs. Custis, and a favorite little dog, Quiz, a present from Colonel Bumford and Lady Bumford, were lost, together with a part of my baggage, including most of my papers. Several of those on board sustained partial losses of clothing and baggage, and merchandise to the value of several $1,000s belonging to some of the passengers on deck was also lost. Captain Hall, who commanded in attending to my safety and his other passengers, neglected to secure his own money, which to the amount of $800 in specie and $500 in notes in a secretary, is supposed to have been dropped into the river in the confusion of the moment. At 9 o'clock, I was induced to cross the river and go to the house we had perceived on the other bank, to shelter myself from the storm which threatened us. Monsieur Thibaudot and Bastien accompanied me. I had scarcely left when one of the parties who was on the lookout on the shore pointed out to us a steamboat descending the river, and immediately afterwards another. This double news filled us with joy and hope. Soon these two vessels arrived opposite to us and stopped. One of them, a vessel of large size and remarkable beauty, was the Paragon. She came from Louisville and was going to New Orleans with a heavy cargo of whiskey and tobacco. By a very lucky circumstance for us, one of our companions in misfortune, Monsieur William Nielsen, was one of the owners of this vessel, and hastened to put it out at the disposal of the Tennessee Committee to transport me, generously taking on himself all the chances of another misfortune and the loss of insurance. Immediately, our whole party, abandoning our bivouac, prepared on board of the Paragon. The Paragon left the scene of the wreck sometime before noon on Monday, 9 May, steamed up the Ohio without further incident, and we arrived in Portland, 3 miles below Louisville, during the night of 10 to 11 May, 1825.
That That was extraordinary, General. Thank you very, very much. And what an honor it is to have the General speak to us right here on the site where it happened, on the day where it happened. So thank you very much, General. Fascinating stuff. So the committee for the Shipwreck Day is here today, and I've already introduced Jerry and Stephen, but there's a third member, and we held Zooms. I think we had about 6 Zooms, several emails, to make things happen, but this person really, really did help us steer the ship, and I'm very honored to have the Harrison County historian with us, Karen Schwartz. Thank you so much, Karen.
I think I'll walk out here. I've walked in Gandhi's footsteps, but I've never had a chance to stand in the footprints of Lafayette, so I am honored. So first of all, everybody wants to know, what is she from Harrison County doing down here? Stay in your lane. We got a lot going on in court, and I'll be glad to tell you more than you ever wanted to know about that as well. But I also attended a meeting. Before I met Chuck, I met Bonnie Wise. Some of you know Bonnie Wise. She was giving a speech at Clark County. And I went to that, and she just kind of offhand mentioned that Lafayette had a shipwreck at Cannleton. And I'm like, well, she was telling all about the other events that were going to happen. If you want to see him land tomorrow, I don't know if it'll be this same Lafayette or not, but if you want to see him land tomorrow, it's happening tomorrow.
It's the same Lafayette.
Same Lafayette. I'll see you tomorrow then. All right.
And if you want, in Lafayette, if you want to find out where we'll be, go to Lafayette200.org. Sorry, Karen.
That's all right. Or go to friendsoflafayette.org, which is probably how y'all got here
Right.
as well. You can do the events. And then Sunday, we're going to, Monday. Sunday's Mother's Day. Monday, we're going to escort him across the bridge from Louisville, across the Big Four Bridge, over to Jeffersonville. So don't miss that. But anyway, when I mentioned it to Bonnie, she was kind of like, what's in Cannleton? Don't take that offense if you're from Cannleton, but she just, well, no, that's not happening. So then I brought her to be a speaker in Harrison County, so she was moving this direction, and if she wasn't killing herself getting ready up there for tomorrow, I'm sure she would have been here today. But she mentioned Cannleton again. I'm like, we got to do that. And then I went to a program at the Jeffersonville Library, and Mr. Chuck was giving a speech, okay, and telling about this. And I listened, and I went out and got in the car, and Chuck had mentioned shipwreck. And me and Bobby are getting ready to leave, and I'm like, wait a minute. He's talking about Cannleton, and he said, this is a rough paraphrase, but he said, I just wish there was somebody and there was some way we could do this. And at that time, he didn't know, but some of you know this. Karen Schwartz spends a big part of her time I usually say old man, Chuck, so don't take offense, but making old men's dreams come true. You know what I'm saying? It's true. It's true. So I thought, I marched back in there, and I said, well, wait a minute. And then he said, I just wish we could do this. He'd mentioned the dog and the whole 9 yards. So I just kept going. Some of you in the crowd, the Lawfers definitely know. Marcia, the long-suffering sister, knows. Bobby knows. Laura, who graduated with me, knows. I can be very persuasive. Karen Schwartz can be very persuasive. So I just got going. And I went through my bag of tricks, and I'm sorry, Jack, you didn't get the nod, but he's built many wonderful historic things for me. But I thought of Jim Lynch. He's fixed my rocking chairs, he's finished my wooden bowls, and I said, hey, would you be interested in this? And I told him it's lucrative as always, which means nothing. It's all volunteer, but it's all, every once in a while I get a grant, and then we can make it work. So he said, sure. And he wanted a picture. Well, this is 1825, so there's no snapshots, but I got that picture that Jerry had, we'll show you on the bus, and sent that. And then I got in touch with people up at the museum where the caddy was built, up in Marietta, Ohio. And I was going to Marietta. He says, I can't believe you would drive up here for a 45-minute talk. I've done worse. Have I done worse? I've done worse. So, but it was that big, not this little mini flood we got today. It was the big, one of the 10th largest floods. I just didn't know what I might get into. So I got him to give us a Zoom, and I hope some of you joined in on that too, just telling about how the boat was built and things like that. And got a hold of Steve, and he said sure. Got a hold of Jerry, and we just worked it, and I think it's turned out great. What do y'all think? All right, so you've heard him telling it in his own words, but what if, the excitement is building, what if somebody would take this entire event of everything that we've done and put it into a poem? How great would that be? Okay, so guess what? It has been done, and do not panic. See those little diplomas over there? They can serve as your graduation from the Lafayette Springs Academy today, and it's a copy of the poem. Okay, so make sure you get one of those when you get on the, well, you haven't even heard it yet. You might not want a copy of it, but, all right. This is the Ballad of Lafayette's Shipwreck by Karen Schwartz. I was going to say you were the first people to hear it, but I read it at Homemakers Wednesday, so these three have already heard it. All right, here we go. Get yourself in mind. We're right here. The Ballad of Lafayette's Shipwreck. Shipwreck, right here. One midnight in May, as Marietta's mechanic chugged by. On that one. Lafayette and crew partied on board, that's all I'm going to say, unaware that danger was nigh. Lafayette's son, by the name of George, fretted from stem to stern, and feeling a mounting anxiety, prophetically expressed his concern. I am surprised that on a night so dark, Captain Hall doesn't see the need to maybe lay over till morning, or at least abate his speed. See if a snag's coming by. This would be a perfect time for a snag. Too late! A snag has pierced us. The mechanic has run aground. Make haste to save the general. God forbid our hero should drown. Fetch a lifeboat. Rescue the Marquis first. Lafayette floundered. What else can I say? He floundered safely aboard. Now attention turned to his keepsakes. To lose them, we cannot afford. A trunk, some money, and some sundries, but much of the booty perished. The good news, Lafayette's snuff box was saved. And it had a picture of Washington. So Washington's portrait, that was something he cherished. Now I need my prop. Here's a spoiler alert, everybody. I'm not going to do anything gruesome, but I'm going to introduce you. He's a King Charles Spaniel. Okay? Man's faithful companion named Quiz was on board. The brave Spaniel was down with the ship. The end of the line for our four-legged friend had come to the end of his trip. Now, everybody look this way. But hallelujah! Us steamboats are coming down river. The Paragon steams into sight. Pick up our hero. U-turn. Back upstream. Lafayette's late, but everything turns out right. All right. Thank you, Lafayette. Hope you enjoyed that. This is my Lafayette. All right. Are my steamboat guys in you guys go get in place. I want to introduce. I had a tough act to follow Lafayette. Jim, where's Jim? Yeah, no, that's Jim. Jim is going to follow up, and he's just going to tell you a little bit about building the boat while my launchers are going to get in place. And when he's done, then they'll be in place, and you'll have to turn around and move down toward the river a little bit so you can see the boat. Take it away, Jim. Let's hear for Jim.
Well, I've got about 80 hours in that boat, but there was another boat before this boat, and it's the one y'all have the picture of the boat sinking. But then later on, I found out that the mechanic was real close to the George Washington ship, steamship. They were both built about the same time. So then I disassembled the first boat and rebuilt this boat here. And basically, it's just all scrap wood that I have in my wood shop, and I didn't draw up no plans. I just built it to pretty close to scale. Even though the dog on it is pretty big here, I was able to carve him out this morning. But basically, that is it. Now it did have a wooden bottom, but it would not float because I put too much on top of it. So it now has a styrofoam bottom. No, that wasn't back in the day, but it will float and it will come back up if we lose it. So let's hope that this is a successful launch and sinking of the mechanic. Thank you.
All right, now listen, orient yourself. When we go right here, see my uncle said that they did not. It's not a pond, what do you think? Hey, it worked in the pond, it worked in the lakes, but we didn't know. Don't get that on the rocks. You'll be able to see. This is camera time. I told you. See what says on it? Give me some pictures because I got the boy and Bobby's launching the boat. Are you ready? We're going to see. You ready? Whatever happens, happens, okay? Ready? All right, then, launch it. There it is. You're going too fast. You're going too fast.
Did he lose his walking stick?
Oh, it's a snag.
Oh, okay.
He's able to run into it.
Bobby Schwartz.
The snag is following you.
I had no idea how to make a game.
Oh.
Oh no.
Is he going down?
We got a little
Leaning to starboard.
Yep, it's flying.
Oh no. Oh no, it's sinking.
It really didn't sink underwater. You know,
No, it's not sinking.
Oh, dog's still on there?
Oh no.
Yeah, well, it went.
Oh, there it goes. Oh no.
That dog's still on there.
Will the marquee make a swim? I see a little marquee swimming to shore. Right there. There's a boat.
Now, this
The
boat
poor little
will be on
guy,
display going forward
he turned
in
over.
the Perry County Public, I know not Public Library, in the Perry County Museum. We might have to dry it out a little bit.
There
All right,
he goes.
Jackie,
How do you turn him back up?
Oh, they're gonna catch you. See the fishing.